On the first warm day, I found myself alone, all by myself, so I grabbed a couple of cold brewskis and took off for the woods near my home. The local woods had a number of dirt paths, unofficial trails, and I followed one to a bluff overlooking the winding river below, where I doffed my shirt to catch a few rays and snapped a cap off one of the cold ones. I was at peace with the world and meditating in the pallid April sunlight. In other words, I was thinking about nothing, when my reverie was disturbed by a movement down the trail. I looked to my left, and running towards me was a young woman. She was tall and tanned, with short brown hair and wearing cut-offs and a dark blue tube top, which riveted my attention. She was barefoot and running pell-mell and didn't appear to even see me, although she was almost on top of me. I was stunned. Okay, I am stunned. While the girl looked vaguely familiar, I was sure I'd seen her around and had noticed her. I couldn't understand why she was running at me. A moment later, I understood. Directly behind her came a man I knew, a man who had bullied me when I was a kid. His name, or at least his nickname, was Stewie. Stewie, a big, beefy guy with flaming red hair, and he had a knife in his hand, a long, sharp hunting knife. Within seconds, they had run over me. My beer went flying, splashing over the ground, although I didn't know if I had knocked it over or if they had kicked it over with their feet. And then they disappeared down the trail. It took me a few seconds to process what had happened, but then I was on my feet and running after them. Up ahead, the path veered downwards towards the meandering creek below, but when I reached the crest and was able to see the water and the entire valley, they were gone. Vanished. How could they have vanished? They literally weren't there. I stood there stunned. Yeah, I know. We already covered that. And I scanned the valley floor where two furiously running people would have been plainly visible. And nothing. Nothing. Did I just have a hallucination or something? Maybe I should quit drinking. Maybe. But instead, I went back and finished off the rest of the six-pack and got drunk. My expansive, meditative mood was as gone as the running phantoms. I drained my last brewski and went home, and quickly forgot all about it. It was several weeks later when I saw the young woman again, her picture staring back at me as I surfed the news. The headline read, "After a year, no leads in the murder of Vanessa Gagnon." Not only did I recognize her photo, I realized I knew her, had known her. Slightly. She had attended a rival high school, and I'd seen her at some of the football games, and later in bars and clubs. I knew her name was Vanessa, and I thought she was kind of hot, but I had never actually spoken to her. The article stated she had been stabbed to death, and her body found in a ditch north of the city. I guess I had known that too, as I now recalled the story, but of course I'd forgotten it over time. After all, I didn't really know her. Really. But she had been stabbed to death. Stabbed. with a hunting knife with a long, sharp blade? Had I witnessed her murder? It had all seemed so real. But it couldn't have been, not in any objective sense. Vanessa had been dead a year when I saw her on the path. And Stewie was behind her, with a knife in his hand. Stewie and knives. Stewie was about 5 years older than me. He had terrorized me growing up, pushing me around and trying to steal my spending money. And sometimes threatening to cut me with a small knife he said was a switchblade, but which was probably just a pocket knife. I gave him a wide berth and would run away at the very sight of him. But by the time I was in high school, he had faded from my life. I found I had other things, other people, to worry about. I still saw Stewie around sometimes. He hung out at a bar I used to frequent. I think he worked for the post office, and he looked like he was probably still a bit of a prick. Had he murdered Vanessa? It seemed to fit with what I knew of his character. But what proof did I have? That I didn't like the guy? That he was a bully? That I had had a vision of him chasing Vanessa with a knife? If I told the cops that, they would think I had done it. I would have to let it lay. But Vanessa had other ideas. At first, I saw her in my dreams. Some of them pretty erotic, too. It happened for several nights in a row, and it left me feeling kind of sick, having horny dreams about a murdered girl. But then I began to wonder if these nightly visions were Vanessa's way of trying to contact me, trying to tell me something. But then I began to see her in daylight, when I was wide awake. I always saw her at the very edge of my vision, although she seemed to draw a bit closer with each sighting, and she was always scantily dressed in cut-offs and top, as well as barefoot, even at night, even in the rain. One night, she stood below my apartment, staring up at the bedroom window with what? Entreaty? I stared back, weighed down by a sense of oppression. What is it you want, Vanessa? What do you want me to do? What can I do? And that's when the idea hit me. I found Stewie in Canada 411, then typed the following note on my PC. I know what you did. VG. I put the note in a cheap envelope and sent it, wearing gloves so my fingerprints would not smudge the paper. Then, at an anonymous terminal and on a guest pass at the public library, I posted the same message on his Facebook page and on his Twitter account. I even found a payphone. Yeah, they still exist. And when he picked up, I whispered, I know what you did. Who the fuck is this? Stewie growled. I know what you did. And then I hung up and repeated the process every few days and awaited developments. If Stewie was innocent, nothing would happen. But if he was guilty, there would be some kind of reaction. Nervous reaction. I began to haunt Stewie's usual bars to see how he was taking things, and found he wasn't taking them at all well. One night, I found him, shit-faced drunk, drinking like a man possessed, like a man in mortal fear. Stewie was so drunk, they finally cut him off and strongly suggested, 2 bouncers strongly suggested, he call it a night and go home. And I was already outside, waiting in the parking lot, where I watched him get into his car and drive away. I called 911, of course. Drunk driver. I was just acting the part of the law-abiding citizen. How was I to know he would lead police on a high-speed chase and crash and burn, crash and burn, after colliding with a car and wiping out a family of 4, 2 preschoolers? I suppose I was an instrument of justice. As far as Stewie was concerned, he must have been guilty of murder, to fall apart so quickly and in that way. But 2 preschoolers? What had they done? Vanessa came to me in a dream one last time. She was naked and offered herself to me. As a reward? I turned away in shame and self-disgust, but not before I saw her eyes were 2 orbs of jetty blackness, midnight black eyes, demonic eyes. The next day, I received a letter in the mail. The envelope was the one I had used when I sent the note to Stewie. The note to Stewie which had caused the whole tragedy in the first place. Scrawled on it, in rough handwriting, were the words, "Return to sender." Inside was a single sheet of paper with the following words, also in a rough hand. "We know what you did." That night I saw them from my bedroom window. Stewie was staring up at me, standing on the exact same spot where Vanessa had stood. And now he had a real switchblade, which he kept flicking open all the time, grinning maliciously. And behind him, shuffling awkwardly across the pavement, was a family of 4. The family Stewie had killed. The family I had killed. I unlocked my door and left it open. Some night they will come for me. Let them come and exact their justice and allow me to expiate my guilt. My guilt for I know what I did. The moral of the story? Words are powerful weapons. Think about that the next time you sit down to write something to someone, whatever your intent. Alas, our poor susceptible hero. He worked himself into a real stew over Vanessa, and in stewing over Stewie. Screwy. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,021 subs in 2021. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pics Here, that's PX here, while the music was the menacing aftermath by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.